I'm going to read something I'm working on called A Lot Happens in Cars.
Oh, sure.
3 stories that take place in cars. Story 1. 2002 Dodge Durango, 2 guys, a northern state, winter. Tom took a long, lung-saturating toke before he handed the joint back to Eddie, who did the same. The view from the parking lot behind the beverage center in downtown Somawaska was so depressing it didn't improve at all with the drug. In fact, it only made the scene more dangerously bleak. It occurred to Tom that the setting could lead a weaker person to suicide, but for him the dramatic tension in fighting the impulse was better than nothing. At least there was the illusion that something was going on, and now that he was thoroughly stoned, stacking crates and keeping track of an endless variety of sodas would be more of a challenge after a break, and that was a good thing too. Eddie stubbed out the joint. He was going overboard today trashing Jenny, but he complained so consistently, it was hard to tell if he was paying extra attention to her or had just grown as bored of complaining about everything else as Tom was of hearing him do it. Did he like her? Why else would he notice she was late this morning and go on about her wearing the same jeans as yesterday? She wasn't even. These had purple trim. Jenny turned Tom down more than once, so if she went with Eddie instead, that would be pretty perplexing. But there was no sign it was happening yet. Story 2. 1998 Honda Civic. A mother and her young son outside Columbia, South Carolina, last night. He set up the entire toy army with the fort, and even though it was all on the blanket and wasn't going all over the place, she grabbed each piece of his well-composed tableau, shoved them into the box, and guarded them up front. He hated the stupid car, and he hated hiding their clothes under the seat every night, too. It was such a pain, you just had to take them out again in the morning. He called her an idiot. She was pulled over on State 40 next to the farm. Cops appreciate a mom who's careful not to fall asleep while driving. Blankets and pillows were fine, but she wasn't about to let a sprawling G.I. Joe war let on they'd been camped there for hours. If they were home, she'd have simply praised his creativity. He'd remember her nervous, always scolding. She knew William would be taken away at some point, and the thought shot adrenaline through her every moment, the rush only matched by the guilt she felt avoiding the authorities. They might put him somewhere that had a bathroom and a bed if she couldn't. It was getting harder to sleep sitting up all night, wondering at what point was she breaking the law. She hadn't really slept in months. She forgot what it felt like. She didn't seem to need it anymore. Story 3. 2012 Lexus GX, a man and a woman, Connecticut, next week. She'd probably been in cooler cars, Aston Martin convertibles, sporty numbers like that. The Lexus made him feel like a fuddy-duddy, even though she was almost his age, which made her by far the oldest woman he'd dated since divorcing. She'd probably had some exotic times, experiences, fun. It was intimidating. He didn't date younger women only because they were attractive. From another generation, they were refreshingly different from his ex, and less intimidating without much of a past to compare a man to. Fucking Cecile in the back seat seemed playful and an epic memory to be made when he thought of it, but pulling off to the overlook he'd done research to find, approaching it under the canopy of pines with the bright moon glowing through the branches, his only thought was that they couldn't do it in his square-ass, frumpy Lexus. He didn't like who that made him. The notion that he could never be as good as what might lurk in her memory had nothing to do with it. What was he thinking buying a Lexus, the 21st century old man's car? The Buick, or worse, the Oldsmobile of its time? You can't fuck a woman in an Oldsmobile and expect her to fall in love with you. His mind raced until he came up with an excuse. It was a good one. He'd make it up to her.
What?